And we're live. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 40 of the Technology for Good show. I'm astonished we've gotten this far and doing really well. Guest on the show today, we have two. We have Chris Kernahan and another guy, VJ, who's about to dial in. So VJ works for a company called MongoDB, and when he heard I was wearing his t-shirt, he decided he had to join in the fun. And Chris, while we're waiting for DJ to dial back in there, do you want to introduce yourself? You're an alumni of the show. Everyone knows who you are, but let's go for it anyway, just in case.
Yeah, so I'm an SAP mentor, cloud architect, and just general lover of technology in general. So always glad to be here, Tom. Always a good show.
And what's a cloud architect do?
So at the moment, I'm working with SAP. So we take our customers from an on-premise system or a brownfield system or a greenfield system and map that journey into the cloud. So what steps need to be taken in order to move them to the cloud systems, whether that be an infrastructure as a service or platform as a service offering or software as a service. So it's looking at all those components and making sure that the customer gets the solution that they actually need. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay. So it's a service rather than a product that you're doing.
Yeah.
Cool. Good stuff. I think VJ has joined us, but I think he's joined us on the viewer side rather than the dial-in side, because looking at the page for the site, it says that he's checked in at 17:01 about a minute ago. So I think he's viewing rather than joining in. He's clicked on the other link. There are two links, VJ. One is a viewer-only link, which is I think where you are now, and the other is a participant link.
Want me to send him the participant link and see if I can get it?
Sure, he should have it already because he came in earlier. But yeah, do go for it anyway.
Yeah.
I'll head into the. Oh, he's back. No, we're back. Hey, VJ.
Hey.
How are you doing? You're a bit dark there, VJ. There's light behind you, so no one can see your face. I don't know if that's by design.
No idea. I just chose a random seat.
So, VJ, we've already had Chris introduce himself. I've told everyone watching that I'm wearing the MongoDB T-shirt, and that's where you're coming from. So, do you want to introduce yourself and tell anyone who's watching who you are and who and what MongoDB is?
Sure. So, my name is Vijay Shankar. I work at MongoDB. I run our services business and our channel business. Ex-SAP mentor, have known Tom and many others in this Hangout for a long time. MongoDB is an open source database, hopefully the leading NoSQL database at this time.
Nice. And who would be likely to use MongoDB, VJ, and what for?
Pretty much everyone. We have had 9 million downloads at this point, and we have about 12,000 downloads a day or something along those lines. So it's a fairly general purpose database. So yeah, a lot of people use it.
But VJ, it's not something I'd use to keep my contacts in.
Sorry, say that again, Tom.
It's not something I'd use to keep my contacts in.
Why do you say that?
Tom. Tom. Fell into that trap.
Now, walk us through some use cases for MongoDB, VJ. Go on.
Sure. So one of the most common use cases for MongoDB is one view of the enterprise. So like one view of your customer, one view of a product, stuff like that. A very famous use case is MetLife, the insurance company. They have 70 plus policy systems. So if you call their 800 number to get policy information, it used to be pretty tough for those guys to find it very easily across these systems. So they started a project on a relational database to get a 360 view of the customer. Nothing wrong with the relational. They got that information. Project took a couple of years and a few $1 million, I think like $25 million or so. The tough part was as soon as something changed in one of those 70 systems, then this 360 solution stopped working and they had to redo the project. And after a few iterations, they gave up. They switched to Mongo. In 3 months, they were live. That project is called the Wall Project, because the intention is to show everything about a customer to a call center agent like a Facebook wall. So that's one of the most popular use cases in MongoDB, mostly because the customer themselves, went around the world talking about that. And we have a lot of banks using MongoDB for one view of risk. So that's another very, very popular use case. Most of the big banks in the world use MongoDB. Goldman Sachs, Citibank, they all use MongoDB quite heavily.
Cool.
I'm using it for time series data storage for performance statistics as well. That's pretty cool. So
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm just using it for a little side project, just for a couple of million rows worth of data. So it'll do very big and very small.
Yep,
Okay, so
we have people using it for a petabyte of data. I'm pretty sure, Chris, one of these days you will use it for something larger too.
I hope so.
Cool. So I'll have to download it and stick my contacts into it.
By all means, please do.
All right. Vijay, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the format of the show, but generally what we do is we go through a number of news stories and have a couple of comments on them. And we generally start with kind of a climate type story, and that's usually kind of a context setting thing, and then we go into and that's usually kind of a bad news one. And then we get the bad news out of the way and we switch to kind of better news stories, which are more technical based. Technology based. So the first story I wanted to talk to isn't as much a bad story, really, as I would often have, and it's one about how the UN climate change deal must have legally binding targets, says the EU. And I'll have the links to all these stories in the show notes afterwards, and also in the blog post on Greenmonk. And basically, what this story is talking about is there's a new meeting of the various politicians from all the countries in the world. There's two meetings coming up. The first one is in Lima and the next one is in Paris. And the agreements in Lima will be brought forward to be ratified in the meeting in Paris. And the background to this is that the 2009, the last really, really big climate change conference was in 2009 in Copenhagen. And there was an accord came out of that which 167 countries signed, which said that we want to kind of keep global warming, we want to limit it to warming of 2 degrees and no more than that. And that's all well and good, but it wasn't legally binding. And now what the UN is saying in this story is, yeah, that was all well and good, guys, but now for the next big agreement, we want it to be legally binding so that going forward, if countries break this agreement, there are sanctions that we can put in place. And, it makes a huge amount of sense, I think, because there hasn't been anything legally binding. That agreement in 2009 for 2 degrees, yeah, it's nice, it's an accord, everyone signed up to it and felt good about it, but to be honest, sod all has happened since, and anyone can walk away from that at any time with no penalties. So I understand that putting a legally binding framework around this might make people more reluctant to sign it, but on the other hand, if there's no legally binding framework there, then everyone will sign it and no one will do anything.
Well, I think we just need to look at the swing in the Americas in the midterm elections. That they've already started a campaign to actually defund a number of science initiatives, and legally binding targets would make that more difficult. So it's we can already see the Americas trying to, the USA trying to move the goalposts a little bit. It's going to be a very, very difficult thing to do, to get it legally binding.
It is, but at the moment, I think with the current president, at least, there's a chance, because he is he's aware of climate change and is not a skeptic, and in fact, he sent was it Biden to China to negotiate a bilateral agreement just between America and China,
Yes.
Which was signed just 2 weeks ago, and that was a surprise to everyone. It came out of the blue.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if this can happen while he's still president, then there's some hope. But if it comes under a Republican regime, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
It's probably tough anyway, given the president probably can use some executive power to get it done, but the money to enforce it needs to come from Congress. And both houses are now under Republican control, so I honestly don't know enough about the situation to know whether this is a good or bad thing. But knowing US politics living here, it would be tough to imagine that a Republican-controlled side of the government would give any money to Obama at this point.
Right.
Oh dear. Okay, well we can just walk away. So.
Exactly.
So just to put it in context, VJ, because I'm not sure how aware of this you are, but like I said, the 2009 Climate Accord from Copenhagen agreed on a 2-degree warming. Now, scientists are kind of going, 2 degrees, that's a hell of a lot. But, you know, okay, if that's what we've signed up for, that's what we've signed up for. Currently, the amount of warming we've had is 0.8, so if another 1.2 degrees, we can go. 1.2 degrees warming, to get to that, we need to emit 565 gigatons of CO2. Now, a gigaton is 1,000 million tons, a billion in most English speakers' terminology. So 565 billion tons of CO2 we need to inject into the atmosphere. Now that sounds like a lot, because 565 billion tons of CO2, that's a lot of tons. The thing is, we typically inject about 30 to 40 billion tons per annum, about 50% of which is reabsorbed. So you're looking at an increase year on year of about 20 billion tons of CO2 in the atmosphere. So we don't actually have that many years of our current rate of CO2 emissions left, and yep. That's okay. That's okay. Okay, we have a kind of a timeline there, except that when you look at the fossil fuel companies and the fossil fuel countries, and countries I mean the likes of Venezuela and places like that, where the countries have nationalized the fossil fuels, when you look at those, they have proven reserves of 2,795 gigatons as of 2011. So in 2011, they had proven reserves of 2,795. That's a lot more than the 565 we can actually extract and shove into the atmosphere. Now, those stated reserves of 2,795 gigatons, like I said, they're proven reserves. So these fossil fuel countries and companies have lending based on their extraction of those fossil fuels and subsequent burning and injection into the atmosphere. They have borrowings based on that. Plus, for the companies, their share price is based on that. So if we say to them, sorry guys, you remember that proven reserve you have of 2,795? Yeah, that's going to stay in the ground. Suddenly their share price drops by 80%. Yeah. And that 2,795 gigatons of proven reserves, when you convert that into actual dollar value, comes to about $20 trillion. So our choices are, we take a $20 trillion hit on the global economy, we write off 80% of the worth of the fossil fuel companies, or we emit 2,795, and that's 2011 proven reserves, because we've had a lot more kind of shale gas findings in the meantime, so it's probably closer to 3,000, but whatever. The figure I have, the most up-to-date figure I have, is the 2,795. We can take that out of the ground, and then we don't lose the $20 trillion, but we have massive climate consequences that we have to deal with. And that's a circle that I just don't know how we square.
It's a pretty stark picture that you painted, right? So the additional concern I have is I just finished a trip to India, right? And England, and I came back. I mean, the number of cars on the road in my hometown, which was a really sleepy place when I left India, and now there is just no comparison, right? So they all run on gas. I mean, there are no electric cars in that part of the world, at least not that I could see.
Yeah.
And it would be pretty tough to convince the political machinery in India that they should control emissions. Maybe they do. I'm not very familiar, but it would be pretty tough because the general prevailing wisdom, at least among common man, is US and Western Europe has advanced technology, and they probably caused most of the trouble historically, given they were far more advanced.
No, that's true.
And it is unfair to put the burden on this largely developing countries like India, who actually can single-handedly do a lot of damage, given the economy is booming and there's a lot of cars and other things happening. It's a tough balance to strike.
It is.
On one hand,
it is, and the I don't know how. I mean, you know more about Indian politics than I do, Vijay, obviously. But the one kind of ray of hope that I see there is that the new Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is a proponent of solar power. And
yes.
He has said that he wants to get solar power to every house in India by, I think he said by 2019 or by 2020, which would be enormous. And the reason that that's such a big deal for me, and I think it's such a big deal anyway, is because if you look at the electricity grid in most developed countries, if you look at emissions in general in most developed countries, electricity generation counts for about 38% of the emissions. And then transportation counts for another 32% of emissions. But while I take your point that in India the transportation fleet is fossil fuel based almost entirely, the technology in transportation is moving more towards electrification of the transportation fleet. So at the very least, we're looking at about 38% of emissions. In India, I suspect it's higher because most of the Indian electricity is generated from coal. So I want to say in India, it's going to be over 40%, probably closer to 60% of emissions coming from electricity. And if you start adding in the transportation fleet and electrifying it, you could get up to maybe 70, 80% of emissions that you could lever if you started getting your electricity from renewable sources, primarily solar, which India is a fantastic candidate for, and you've got a prime minister who is very pro-solar and who has done a lot in his own area to bring solar forward in his own geographic region. I mean, he pioneered solar in the last 5 years in his own region before becoming prime minister. So he's very pro-solar, and the country is very ideally situated. So I've got my fingers crossed there. I think India, while currently it's not in a great situation, I think there's a prime minister there who wants to move it in the right direction, and the resources are there. Solar has gotten a lot cheaper in the last 5 years, so I think it's a possibility.
It's definitely a possibility, and the state that I was born and raised, that's almost 100% hydroelectric powered, the electricity.
Wow.
There's no coal that I can think of. I think there is one small station, but it's like less than 5% of the electricity or something. So it's mostly hydel, but they still have power cuts, right? I mean, half the year they still lose electricity every day for an hour or two. So it's some ways to go. And
right.
Yeah, so the prime minister is an awesome guy, has a very forward-looking agenda, and he might be the saving grace after all. Hopefully.
Speaking of renewables, so we'll go on with some of the stories because I've a ton of stories here and we won't get through half of them, but we'll go for it anyway and see how far we get. So the first story that I saw that I thought was interesting came out of Scotland, and it was the fact that, and you'll see it on screen now in a second, renewables, seeing as we were talking about those, are now Scotland's biggest energy source. So this is fantastic. Scotland has been a big leader in renewables in the UK, and keeps pushing the envelope forward. And Scotland has an aim of getting beyond its actual requirement in energy needs using renewables and exporting energy using renewables to the rest of the UK and possibly to mainland Europe as well. Scotland aren't the only ones in this kind of situation. Here in Spain, renewables, in fact, here in Spain, not just renewables, but if we just take wind energy itself, wind energy is now the largest producer in Spain. Wind energy has come in over 20%. It's around 21, 22%. Nuclear is next at about 20%. And then you have all the other forms. Oh, I'm hearing a lot of background noise there from someone.
That's my daughter. Let me get the door.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. So I was just saying we're doing really well here in Scotland as well, and I've seen as well a story that I haven't got a link to right now that the UK, the amount of wind energy in the UK has gone up significantly as well, and even in the US we're seeing it as well. So renewables are on a real boom at the moment, and so a lot of the reasons are because they're cheap to deploy. And they've got an initial capital startup cost, sure, but once that's in place, the running costs are minimal. And if you look at the cost per kilowatt hour generation, then renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels, and they're cheaper than nuclear, marginally cheaper than nuclear, and significantly cheaper than fossil fuels.
What was it? The solar power price point? It's going to hit parity.
It's already hit parity in the US in several states.
Yeah.
I think it differs from state to state depending, obviously, on the amount of sunlight that falls there.
Yeah.
And the cost per kilowatt hour there. But in the next 2 years, all of the US, all 50 states in the US, including Alaska, will hit parity for solar.
Yeah. It's funny actually because you mentioned about the total cost of ownership of the actual device itself.
Yeah.
I know. Harland and Wolff have spent many years diversifying from shipbuilding to offshore wind generation, and and also I think they're doing wave generation as well. But they have a number of patents out for review at the moment on offshore wind farms.
All right.
Which is just absolutely fantastic. So they.
For anyone who doesn't know, Harland and Wolff is a massive shipbuilding plant in Belfast. It was the place where the Titanic was built, if I remember correctly. And the shipbuilding industry collapsed in the 90s in the West, basically. And as a result, Harland and Wolff was pretty much idle for a number of years. Well, it was one of the biggest employers in Belfast, if memory serves, for decades. And suddenly the whole thing collapsed, and now they're coming back based on building renewables, as you say, Chris, and they've got patents around offshore renewables and stuff like that. So that's a phenomenal success story.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So cool.
The one interesting question on the wind power. I mean, wind power has been around a lot longer than solar,
and it's cheaper.
And cheaper, but why did it take, like 30, 40 years for it to catch parity compared to solar, which started a lot sooner? I mean, wind power was already there when I was a kid.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think one of the problems with renewables has been the volatility in the price of oil. So when oil is expensive, then the investment goes towards renewables, and when oil suddenly becomes cheap, then everyone runs away from renewables, and anyone who has invested in renewables gets badly burnt. So it's been a roller coaster over the last couple of decades. Now, the period from 2008 on, we saw a lot of investment in renewables because people have seen, the whole climate situation really ramping up, and they see that renewables actually, in terms of long-term investment, are where you want to be putting your money, because with the numbers I outlined at the start, we can't take those 2,795 gigatons out of the ground, which means we're going to have to invest massively in renewables and possibly nuclear. So there has been significant investment in the last few years in both wind and in solar, and the cost of both have come down significantly. There's a lot of new technologies, as Chris alluded to, in offshore wind as well as onshore wind. The average size now of a wind turbine has increased, I think, 60 times.
Yeah.
in the last decade. If you look at some of the old wind farms, and I mean, there's a huge one in California whose name escapes me at the minute. But if you look at the old wind turbines there that they started out with, you've got these massive ones with, you know, lots and lots of props on them. And, you know, even if you look at some of the SAP presentations, for example, where they have pictures of wind turbines, they have these ones, they have the old ones from that solar plant in California. And you look at those and you compare them to what they're rolling out today. These ones were, you know, anywhere from 100 kilowatts to 500 kilowatts were the big ones. Now the big ones today are 10 megawatts. You know, so when you start scaling it up like that, you bring the costs down, obviously, because the technologies have increased so much in terms of wind and how you do it. That has a huge rollout effect for the rest of the wind market. So now, if you're building a 1 megawatt turbine, which is now a small one, the costs are way down because, you know, these are run-of-the-mill ones, whereas they would have been enormous before. And similarly for solar, I mean, the costs for solar have come way down. They've been dropping something like 30% a year on year for the last 5 years. And as a result, you get things like this happen.
Have we lost Tom?
Tom, we can't hear you anymore.
No, he's disappeared. But he's dropped, so he has. But there's two things I was going to say about Tom there. You could China on the one hand.
Did I just drop off? Sorry about that.
Just for a minute.
So
that's embarrassing. So I was just saying this Topaz plant, 550 megawatts of solar. I mean, that's pretty big for solar. In terms of wind, it's not that big, but it's pretty big for solar. And while that's now the largest one, there's a new one coming online in a few weeks' time, which is going to be 579. Sorry, it's going to go live in 2015, so a couple of months' time. So, you know, new records are being set in terms of the size of solar plants every single month, we'll say, and probably it'll get more frequent as time goes by.
Tom, how big is Solar City, the one that's co-owned by Elon Musk and his brother? That used to be the largest one.
That's around 350.
That's about 350.
And you know that's about 350. This new one is 550. The next one will be 579, and they'll keep getting bigger because the technologies are improving, the prices are falling. You know, it's like a Moore's law thing. It doesn't follow exactly the same kind of 18-month cycle, but it's getting really towards that.
Yeah.
What would be pretty cool is if somebody figures out a way to get, you know, like a small cell into paint, or you know, something along those lines, where you can paint a house and it can absorb the solar energy, or you paint a car and you absorb solar energy. I think it will just leapfrog and, you know, solve this problem in a hurry.
There's that, plus and something like that will happen as well. It might not be paint. It might be paint. It might not be paint. It might be something like a transparent film as well.
Something along those lines. Yeah.
So there was a firm about 18 months ago I saw. They actually have the solar cells in the side of the glass in the double glazing, and then the refraction actually enables the solar cells. They were deploying it in glass office buildings.
Yeah.
So they were able to generate about a third of their energy from the actual glass without having solar panels on the front of the building. They used the gaps in the between the double glazing.
Yeah, and more and more we're going to see that kind of thing because we will have. I mean, because we need to have it, but also because the technology to do it is not that hard. It's getting easier and cheaper, and with the likes of things like the newer technologies that are coming out in solar, we're going to see, you know, a huge increase, not just in the massive, you know, 500 megawatt plants that we talked about a second ago, but in local generation and in microgrids and community-based generation and things like that as well. All these kind of things. It'll mean a massive re-architecture of the grid will be needed, because the grid right now is architected for central generation and pushing out to consumers, whereas it needs to be re-architected and to be made more intelligent to allow prosumers onto the grid, people who will consume and produce at the same time. But when we start getting there, we'll get a far more sustainable grid.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we need along with that is an increase in storage technologies. And that's something we're starting to see a lot of as well. The battery technologies have come on in leaps and bounds, not just for solar, but for transportation as well. But I was at an opening in North Carolina of a battery plant that's going to be pushing out, large megawatt-sized batteries for utilities, and for the likes of these large solar fields and large wind turbines, because as we know, they are both variable generators.
Yeah.
Solar plants, if a cloud goes across the sun, then the production dips, and as the cloud blows over, it picks up again. And the same with wind. Wind is gusty, and of course, if you have a large wind farm, it's not as gusty, or if it is as gusty, it evens out. But for the smaller wind farms, not so much. So if you have batteries in place there, they can take in some of the power, store it, and then when the wind drops, leave it out, or when the cloud comes over, leave it out, so that you have a more even flow of energy out of the renewable farms, and that makes the grid more stable, and that way it's easier to align supply and demand.
Yeah, I was reading, must be about a month ago, about supercapacitors, where they were playing with, because the problem with capacitors is it just dumps the entire charge out in one go.
Yeah.
New types of capacitors, they want to actually trickle that flow out, because they're if you have really sensitive capacitors, you can literally leave them out and they pick up a charge from the air.
Right.
You get static charges as well. So, but it's if they can perfect that, the supercapacitors are nowhere near as environmentally damaging as battery technology, because the capacitor is literally it's a conductor with a gap.
Yeah.
So that would work really, really well. But that would change the game in terms of energy storage and allow that bring what is it, the supply and demand, evening out the supply and demand.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of getting energy out of the air, while that sounds kind of science fictiony or too good to be true, there's this story. Again, it's in the realms of speculation, but it's about graphene, and scientists have discovered a form of graphene which has an unexpected property, which could, as I say, revolutionize the development of green energy and electric cars. And basically what they've discovered is that graphene allows positively charged hydrogen atoms, also known as protons, to pass through it despite being impermeable to all other gases, including hydrogen itself. So what they're saying is that something like this could allow you to suck hydrogen out of the air and use that as an energy source. I mean, you were saying it, Chris, almost as a kind of throwaway kind of science fiction thing. But this story, I mean, the guys involved in this are Nobel Science Prize winners. I mean, one of the guys here, I'm just looking at it here, Professor Andre Geim, Geim. I'll flash it up on the screen there so you can see it as well. He won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2010.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is real science. It's real scientists. It's not. Yes, it is right now. It's still in the realms of speculation because they haven't actually produced it, but they've shown that it can be done.
Mm.
And for things like cars and for energy storage and for things like building backup for variable generators like renewables that we talked about, something like this could be incredibly interesting. Just by the way, Michael Koch from SAP just dropped in a comment there saying he heard the old BMW i3 batteries will be recycled as batteries for solar parks, and
Wow.
that's again, that is in the realm of speculation, but it's not beyond the bounds of possibility. But I think it's more likely that, and it's not just BMW i3, it's Tesla, it's Koda, it's anyone who's making electric cars, Nissan Leaf, for example. The car batteries are anywhere from kind of 25 kilowatt hours to 85 kilowatt hours, depending on the make and model of car. They lose about 20% of their capacity after being used for about 8 to 10 years. So they're down to about 80% of their capacity. That's not good enough for them to be used in a car anymore. But if they take it out of the car, while you could sell it to a utility to use in a solar park, it's kilowatts. It's less than 100 kilowatt hours generally.
Yeah.
Where it would make a lot more sense is in the residential market, or maybe in low end commercial market. So a business or a home buys a battery, or in a business case a number of batteries, and you use them then for energy storage, and then you start to do things like you go off grid when energy is expensive, and you go back on grid when energy is cheap. And you go off grid just by going onto your battery array. You might have 3-4 batteries in your garage or something.
But the thing about it is, there's currently legislation to prevent that type of thing because of battery safety. So,
but if the batteries are safe enough to be put into a car, then they're safe enough to be in a garage, because in a car they're a lot more likely to come into contact with something at 80 miles an hour than in a garage.
Yeah, true. I absolutely agree. It's a good secondary use, and at the same time, the great, if you had a bank of 3 or 4 batteries in the house, you could literally just swap them in and swap them back out again, and have the car battery charged when it was actually cheap, and just stick it back in. It's a bit like Shia Gassi in the
Better Place.
Better Place. That's what it was. That was his idea, was to rent the battery packs in gas stations. So yeah.
And in fact, Tesla are starting to follow that model now. Tesla has charging stations you can bring your Tesla car to, drive in, and in under a minute have your old battery swapped out and a new battery put in place. It's to make it easier to get in, get a charge, and get out. So instead of waiting the 15 minutes to get an 80% charge from a supercharger, you're there for 1 minute, you get an entirely new battery, and you drive off.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that model is that, and this is something I talked to about Better Place at the time for just this reason. What it means is that Tesla, Better Place originally, but they're gone now. So Tesla now have a stock of fully charged batteries at all times.
Yeah.
Which means they are now a virtual power plant.
Yeah.
So now they can start buying and selling energy, and so they can literally become part of a demand response program and literally become a power plant just by taking in energy when it's cheap and selling it on when it's not.
Well, look at his battery factory in Nevada.
Yeah, the Gigafactory. Yeah.
The Gigafactory. That is just nuts.
Yeah.
That is just nuts.
And the thing is, again, not in the realm of speculation. This is something that is actually being built as we speak.
No, absolutely. I was reading about it the other week. The 3 or 4 sites they had: Nevada, they had California, and Texas, and somewhere else. They had 4 sites, and I think they settled on Nevada.
They settled on Nevada because they got good tax breaks there.
Oh, it was something ridiculous. It was absolutely insane. So it was they have a free 80-year lease on the land, and the tax breaks that they get is just absolutely phenomenal. But as a company, they really press the state governments and turn them against each other and to the benefit of their own ends. But it's going to create a lot of jobs. It's going to create a lot of opportunity. So it's not going to be all bad.
No, it's going to be fine. The interesting thing, the really interesting thing about that factory is they want to make it a zero energy footprint plant.
Yes.
So while they're making these batteries which allow people to go off grid, they'll be doing it being entirely powered themselves by renewables.
Yeah.
It's a massively ambitious undertaking, and it's incredible that they would even. I mean, the ambition, the vision it takes to come up with an idea like that, and then to go and execute on it.
Well, hold on. We're talking about the same guy who's sending trucks to the International Space Station. We can't fault the vision, and we certainly can't fault the execution of some of his things.
No, that's true. I mean, I distinctly remember being fascinated by the fact that in '78, Bill Gates' ambition was to put a personal computer in every home in the country.
Mm.
And at that time, the vision it took to come up with just the idea that everyone would have a computer in their home. That's just fucking ridiculous. And of course now it's just taken for granted. But it's people who have those kind of visions who can come up with something as wild and unlikely as that, and then make it happen. It's like, wow.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Especially when his company was not a PC maker.
Yeah. They were just making the software. Phenomenal.
Software changed the world.
Yeah. So we're going to change tack a little now because I came across an interesting story this morning about Raspberry Pi controlled aquaponics. So this is kind of an IoT story, and this is the story of aquaponics is a bit like hydroponics, but what it does is it recycles the water so that any waste products are cleaned and put back into effect. So you have plants and animals, and the animals produce waste, which is fed to the plant, which clean it up, and then it's fed back to the animals again. And you get a whole recycling thing going on. And this particular setup, it's open sourced, so anyone can go away, download the schema, and roll it out yourselves. And it uses things like Plotly for graphing. You've got Python scripts which are up on GitHub. Mm-hmm. There's a nice video on how you do it here as well. You've got the whole materials, etc., etc. So because I've been talking a lot on the show over the last few weeks about IoT, Internet of Things, that kind of stuff, I thought that was a nice story to include when I saw it this morning. And it's kind of the stuff I've been playing with myself. I got myself a little Arduino and breadboard and stuff, and I've been, playing with a couple of projects there. I'm going to get my kids into it as well. But when you start seeing things like this, and at our Monkey Grad nearly 2 years ago now, we had a Dutch guy there who built a home brew pie. That's it, exactly. You remember?
Yes, the brew pie. That was awesome.
Yeah, exactly. A similar kind of thing, but for brewing beer. I mean, how awesome is that? And again, that was built on Raspberry Pi as well. And again, it was open source. You could go away. You could get some of the hardware from him, specialized hardware, and you could get the scripts and stuff. And suddenly you had your own homebrew kit, which it managed the temperature of the brew, so you could change with different temperatures at different times. You had different kind of beers produced. So it's just the whole upsurge of interest in IoT has been fascinating to me in the last I want to say 18 months. It's really kind of it's on that kind of hockey stick curve. And I'm going to put a quick plug in here because it's my show and because I can. Red Monk, we're producing our own IoT conference next week in London, and it's our second year doing it. We call it Thing Monk, So, Thing from Internet of Things and Monk from Red Monk. All our conferences have a kind of a Monk thing. We have Monkey Gra and we have Monktoberfest, and now we have Thing Monk. We ran it for the first time last year. It was hugely successful, so we're running it again this year. This year it's happening in London. Next week it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tuesday is a hack day where we get people in and they start hacking the hardware. Wednesday is tech-related talks, and Thursday is called Business of IoT, so it's business talks around IoT. So, okay, plug out of the way. If you're in London, you're interested in IoT, check it out, thingmonk.com. You'll find all the details there. But, this whole area is exploding, and Vijay, I mean, this has got to be something that's interesting to you too, because a lot of the people who are hacking this kind of stuff, they'll be producing significant amounts of data, and they'll need somewhere to put it.
Absolutely, and MongoDB is quite widely used in IoT scenarios for a very simple reason, right? So sensors are not very uniform. They all give different kinds of data, and we work on this concept called dynamic schema. So we don't particularly care about organizing information in tidy rows and columns. So IoT is a very natural fit for MongoDB. The unfortunate part is I just came back from London. If I had known, and this is completely my bad, I would have stayed back and attended.
Oh man, I'm sorry. Well, hey, it's Thanksgiving. You should be home with your family, dude. In fact, it's Black Friday. Why are you not out doing your bit for the American economy and buying everything you can find?
My wife is amply taking care of that.
Good. I had to get that dig in. Listen, a question for you, Vijay, on MongoDB. If I download MongoDB for my contacts database, or maybe for some of my IoT projects, can I have it running on a desktop machine, or do I need to install it on a server? What?
No. You can run it on your desktop. Absolutely. You can also run it on AWS. You can run it on IBM SoftLayer or Azure, or we support a wide variety of platforms, and you can do it for free as well.
Yeah, sure, of course. No, I being open source, I figured it was possible to do it for free. Are there Linux, Mac, Windows versions, or
yes.
How does that break out?
All three. I prefer the Linux one, but yeah, I mean we play all the time in the Mac, so the Mac version is just about as easy as well.
Cool. And why do you prefer the Linux version?
Just prior skills, right? I mean, I'm used to programming in Linux, so just.
Okay, it's where you're comfortable.
It's where I'm the most comfortable.
Sure. I get that. Just switching topics again, because I'm a bit all over the place today. I saw this story, which I thought was a great story, from the ITU. The ITU, or the United Nations International Telecoms Union, and they're saying now that internet usage globally is growing at 6.6% in 2014, and the world's online population has now edged over more than 3 billion people, which that's pretty phenomenal, because it's not that long ago we were just saying that the 7 billion people on the planet and only 1 billion are online, and then it became 2 billion are online, and now the ITU, who are an organization who would know, are saying that now over 3 billion people online. It's still, 7 billion people, only 3 billion are online. We've got 4 billion people who are still offline, but still, it's a big improvement, and it shows 6% growth in 2014. We're heading the right direction.
But the report is quite clear in stating that that's the number of devices. It doesn't take into account that you could have more than one device. So there's a challenge there as well. As we all bemoan when we go to tech conferences that the Wi-Fi never holds up, that's because we all have multiple devices. But it still doesn't change the fact that growth has just exploded.
Yeah.
As it has just exploded, and it is phenomenal. And a good, what is it? I don't think it breaks it down there, but I think most of that internet usage is not desktop. It's mobile, tablet, and well, it's not traditional desktop internet. I don't think it has that statistic.
No, I mean what it says, and I'm just scanning it here, is that there are still more than 4.3 billion people not yet online, 90% of whom live in developing countries.
Yeah.
So that's the number. The thing about the devices, that's a different point. What the ITU is talking about is not devices, but actual people. So they reckon.
Understate that, then apologies.
Yeah, no. They reckon there are 3 billion people online and 4.3 billion not yet online. And as I say, 90% of those are in developing countries. But yeah, to your point, yeah, we all have multiple devices. As you say, we go to conferences and we complain about the Wi-Fi, but you know, 4 years ago when we went to a conference, we had our laptop.
Yeah.
Now we go to the same conference and we have our laptop, our tablet, and our phone. And you know, we're wondering why, with the same number of people or even more people who have gone from one device to 3 devices, we're wondering why we can't get online.
Exactly.
That's a typical first world problem.
Okay.
Yeah, but let me also give a non-first world example.
Please.
Yes.
My mom, who has only gone to school till her high school, and she got married when she was 17. The most untech savvy person that you probably can meet on the planet. I tried really hard when I left home, like 15, 16 years ago, tried really hard to get her connected to a computer so that I can trade emails with her or chat with her. Failed for 10 years. And then she got an iPad when she visited me in the US. She still didn't use it. Now that the network speed is high and there is Facebook, it was an overnight change. And when I was home a couple of weeks ago
Vijay, the overnight change was Facebook.
Facebook and the fact that the internet speed increased.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the tipping point. I think Facebook being so easy to use that she didn't need me to train her. She just figured it out herself.
Good.
Even with very limited knowledge of English, she still figured it out. And the speed of internet meant that she is relatively a very impatient person. And the speed of internet, just was the tipping point. And
Sure.
it's amazing how savvy she is now. And now that she figured out Facebook, she has figured out Google Hangouts, she has figured out Skype. I mean, the rest is just happening by itself, and it just continues to amaze me.
That's fantastic.
Fabulous.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I know it from my own experience because I'm a biologist by training. That's what I did in university. I did biology, and it was while I was doing my degree in biology that I learned computers. And I did so because there were 2 computers in the biology department. And when I was in the 3rd year, our head of department said that our 3rd and 4th year projects needed to be handed in on a computer disk. And this was the first time we'd ever had a requirement like this. This is in '89. And like I say, there was 2 computers, and they were Amstrad 1512s. I don't know if you remember those, but those devices didn't have a hard drive. They ran off 5¼ inch floppy drives. So you had to have 3 5¼ inch floppy disks that you stuck into the 2 floppy drives on the machine. One was your system disk, one was your applications disk, and one was your data disk, and you were constantly swapping them in and out. And this was in a room where you had a queue of people behind you waiting to use the computers, and every time you made a mistake, the machine went beep, and you had no training. You had to teach yourself. Now, I was fortunate in that I got 2 summers' work tax rebate off the UK government because I'd worked the 2 previous summers in the UK. And suddenly I had a check in my hand for some money, and I had a need. So I said, well, I can actually get myself out of this situation if I buy myself a computer and teach myself how to use it. I can have it in my home, and if it goes beep anytime and I mess up, it won't be embarrassing because there'll be no one around looking at me going, what's that idiot doing with the computer that is going beep all the time, and why doesn't he hurry up because I need to use it next? I'll have none of that pressure on me. So I bought a computer and I bought a book on how to use a computer, and I taught myself. And that's how I got into IT. And it's when you teach yourself like that in those kind of situations, when you have a need and you sit down and you teach yourself, you are far more likely to retain the skills that you learn from that than you are if you have someone trying to train you.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of situation I think your mother was in, VJ.
Yep.
She had the need, and suddenly she had the ability to do it because she had the high-speed internet suddenly, and she had the easier-to-use applications. And when she started to teach herself, I'm guessing that it was far easier for her to retain the skills that she had just taught herself.
Much more, much more.
Yeah. So the more that happens, and we've talked on this show before about the initiatives of Google's Loon project and Facebook's Drone project for rolling out internet to the more remote regions. I mean, we saw 90% of the people who are not online are in developing countries, and that's the kind of market that Facebook and Google are trying to reach now with these projects to roll out more internet connectivity. And I think I don't know about your mother's case, VJ, but I know in massive amounts of the world where they don't have internet access, the change that it's going to bring to these people, the likes of bringing them access to health information, the likes of bringing them access to education, the likes of some of the MOOCs, the massive online courses, Coursera's and things like that people can suddenly teach themselves third-level skills that they could never access otherwise, doing it remotely. The change that's going to make in the developed world in the next 10 years, it's just, I can't wait to see it. It's going to be enormous.
It might actually be a lot faster than that.
I think it will.
About 18 months ago, in India, I went to the local market and met a butcher that I had known since I was a little kid.
Uh-huh.
And the way the butcher takes orders was he has an assistant, a temp worker, with a pen and paper and a bunch of cell phones. So people will call and order meat, like 2 kilograms of beef, and they just give a cell phone number. When the moment the order is fulfilled, then this assistant calls back or texts back saying, "Okay, it's ready for pickup." The guy comes, pays the money, and they check off on a piece of paper. So I asked this guy, is that working for you? He says, if I had a better way of doing it, I would have saved almost 25% of my income, because I lose 25% of orders because people don't give their full phone numbers, or my guy makes a mistake in writing and misses out on a digit, and he loses about 25% of his potential income.
Wow. And
he suggested to me that if you can find me a computer-based application that can solve this problem, I'm happy to give you 25% of my 1 year's revenue to get it done. I was shocked.
Wow.
I was shocked. So people make that leap so easily.
Here's an idea for you. So the local fish guy here in Spain uses WhatsApp. He's created a WhatsApp group for all of his regular customers. And every morning when he gets a new shipment of fresh fish in, depending on what he has, he sends out a text on to the WhatsApp group saying what he has and saying first come, first serve, as in, text me back what you want on the WhatsApp group and I'll package it up for you. It'll be here waiting for you. And if he gets in a big batch, of anchovies or boquerones as we call them, or something like that, or he gets something nice, he'll just send it out to the group first thing in the morning, and literally bang, 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 the orders will come back in. And he's got most of his stuff sold before 9 o'clock in the morning without even having to open his shop.
Yeah.
It's made a huge business. It's made a huge difference to his business, and WhatsApp is available everywhere.
Yeah,
it is. I'm fairly sure the guys in India are using it a lot too. I mean, I keep in touch with my high school classmates on WhatsApp now. It's amazing how much it is used in India now.
Yeah. I'm just thinking for your butcher buddy, something like that. It's similar, but because it's in a group situation, you don't have the same issue with miskeying numbers. You just send it to the group.
Yes.
That could help him with his 25% losses.
Yes, absolutely. And he doesn't have to pay anywhere close to that amount of money to get the same functionality either.
Exactly. Exactly. So I don't know if you're still in touch with him or if you have a way to contact him, but maybe that might be a suggestion for him.
I will find a way to get him the information. It's a great tip.
Okay, good stuff. So we're going to do one last story. I have a load of them lined up, but we just couldn't get to them all. So one last story that I thought some people might find interesting. And there's been a lot of talk about this OnePlus One smartphone. And it's a phone that's come out of China, which has an incredibly powerful chip in it, the same as the Samsung S5. But it ships for, I think the price in America is about $280 unlocked. Wow. So it's far cheaper than any of the other serious smartphones on the market, but as capable. And the only way you could get it up until very recently was you had to have an invite from somebody else who had the phone, or occasionally they opened it up for, an hour or sometimes as much as 3 or 4 hours for invites, so that if you happened to come across the fact that it was open at that time or you heard about it and got in, you could order one. But now, in conjunction with the whole Black Friday thing in the US, they're allowing people for 72 hours to all markets it ships to, and it ships to 16 different countries. Mm. If anyone is interested, for the next, it's probably the next 48 hours at this point, but no, this is 7 hours ago. So you've got another 60-something hours, 65 hours. If you're interested, and if you're watching this live, you've got another 65 hours to maybe get a OnePlus One order in, if you're interested. And yeah. I'll list this as well. Tech Radar has a review, and it's a very comprehensive review of the OnePlus One phone, and it gives it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It gives it a really good verdict. It says, it offers the Galaxy S5 performance for less than half the price. It has a customizable OS, CyanogenMod is the OS, and a 1080p display. And we can read the review yourself, see if it sounds like it makes sense, and if you're interested, you can order it, as I say, for the next 70 or 65 so hours. So
it's a repeat of the Google Nexus story.
Yeah.
The Nexus 4 and the Nexus 5 hitting a really, really good price point for a very high performance phone.
And again, they were unskinned Android. Yeah. So this is CyanogenMod, which is a slight change off the unskinned Android, but it doesn't come with the usual flair that the Samsung people throw on top of it.
Yeah, I have to say, Tom, I'm really impressed. I might actually go and have a look at that. Or I might actually go and have a look at it for myself, because it's a 5.5-inch screen. Oh,
it is.
It meets my requirements.
So speaking of 5.5-inch screens, I'm on the Apple side of the house.
Yep.
And have been since '89 when I got that first computer. But I had a 5, the iPhone 5 for a while, and I liked it a lot. But when the 6 came out and the 6 Plus came out, I thought, bigger screen, I'll give it a shot. So I ordered the 6.
Mm-hmm.
And before the 6 arrived, I went to our Monktoberfest conference in Maine, and I met one of the guys there, a guy called Eric, who had a 6 Plus. And yep. I said, it's probably going to be too big for me, Eric. And he said, you think? Here, try mine out. And he handed it to me, and I tried it out, and I stuck it in my pocket, and I tried it, and I must have freakishly big hands. I don't know. But I could reach. I could reach everywhere I needed to reach.
Yeah.
I could reach across the screen, no problem, and I could reach, not quite the top left-hand corner with my thumb, but I could get, 95% of the screen.
Yeah.
And I thought, crap, this is actually an awesome phone, and I've ordered the 6, and I should have ordered the 6 Plus. So the 6 arrived. I tried it out, and I loved it. It had a fantastic screen, but it didn't have
as big a screen.
No, it didn't have a leap in terms of battery.
Yeah.
It had the same battery performance as the 5, and that had always been an issue. So I said, okay, I messed up. I should have ordered the 6 Plus. So I contacted Apple, and they said, yeah, no problem. You're within your time to return it. No questions. Return it. We'll send you a 6 Plus. So did.
Yeah.
Got the 6 Plus, and I've had it now for about a week, and wow, I gotta say, the large screen, the 5.5-inch screen that you're talking about for the OnePlus One, it makes a huge difference. It really does. The quality, and on the OnePlus One, it's a 1080p screen. It's got I think it's a little over 400 pixels.
Yeah.
It's either 401 or 410. I can't remember, but it's there's a 4, a 0, and a 1, and it starts with a 4.
Yeah.
So you've got fantastic pixel density. You've got a big screen. If you're on the Android side of the house, the price point is fantastic.
Very much so.
So.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, we didn't get to nearly half the stories we wanted to get to, but we had a great conversation.
We sure did.
That's the most important thing, I think. Thanks a million for joining me, guys, and for everyone who's watching or will watch or did watch. Thanks for your time and interest, and we'll have the show on again next week. Next week, as I say, I'll be in London for the first 4 days of the week, so some of the stories I'll have will be related to ThingBunk and the Business of IoT event. And the rest will be the normal stories from the rest of the week. So do join me again, same time, same channel next week, and thanks for your time and interest.